Look, I was out for like 3 days and Ukraine just about shut off the Sea of Azov. I mean, have you seen this footage? It's wild. It looks like a turkey shoot. Fuel tankers trying to reach the besieged Crimean peninsula were easy targets, and in 4 days, 35 Russian ships were hit. Now, I was at the NATO summit and got in a quick interview with Ukrainian President Zelensky that I cannot wait to share with you all, but right now, we got to talk about these strikes. Now, I couldn't hardly keep up with the footage, and we were at the summit, in fact, watching Zelensky give a speech at the Defense Forum when this footage came out, and it was being shared far and wide. It was crazy. I mean, just seeing ship after ship after ship lined up getting hit by Ukrainian drones. And the unique thing here, the interesting aspect, Crimea is facing a significant fuel shortage right now. One of the few ways they have still available to get fuel to the peninsula is through the Sea of Azov. Maybe not anymore, or at least there's increased risk as the tankers and the captains moving those ships across understand what they're getting into. That is no longer a safe route. Now, starting on July 6th, and this was day after day after day after day, and it's one of the crazy things here, and we'll get to this here in a second, but the Russians started to say, what's going on? Do we just expect this to not happen anymore? Why are these things not protected? And why are they still lined up in a row after we've seen what Ukraine can do? On July 6th, we'll start with that footage. In fact, in the description below, I'll link each one of these videos over on X so you can see them, because each one is like 4 or 5 minutes of continuous strikes. But on July 6th, Ukraine said that in the Sea of Azov, operators struck 2 tankers of the Russian Shadow Fleet. They also, and I want to stress this, it's not as though the only strikes these last few days have been against these tankers. Those are the most notable ones. But meanwhile, we have seen refineries, oil depots, electrical substations, of course, frontline troops and logistics hit. The drone capacity in recent days has been off the charts, and it's wild. So in addition to 2 tankers of the Shadow Fleet being hit, that same day, the Kerch oil depot was hit. Moving on to July 7th, the very next day, the footage came out again, and it's not the same. It's different footage, likely different ships, but I should clarify, when looking at that 35 number, we haven't independently verified that yet, right? Russia also says 35 ships, but to be clear, it's possible that we haven't seen all the footage. It's also possible that some ships were hit more than once. But on July 7th, Ukraine said that pilots hit 8 tankers. So 2 on the 6th, 8 on the 7th. In the Sea of Azov. When fully loaded, they said 8 tankers of this class could carry approximately 40 to 50,000 tons of fuel. They also struck a cargo vessel and a ferry near temporarily occupied Crimea. Things really started to get a little wild on the 8th. So the strikes continued for the 3rd day in a row, where Ukraine says their operators struck 9 more Russian tankers in the Sea of Azov, saying that over the first 72 hours, first, not complete, units of the unmanned systems forces struck 21 enemy vessels, 19 Shadow Fleet tankers, 1 cargo ship, and 1 ferry in Kerch. Now, at this point, again, after day 1, it was pretty wild. Showed the capability, and this is the kind of thing, when you saw Ukraine starting to shut down or significantly impact the southern approaches through the occupied territories, kind of moving from Rostov-on-Don to Kherson, Zaporizhia, and then down into Crimea, we saw an immediate impact because there was this fear of, oh, look, Ukraine can strike at this distance effectively. Immediately, you saw trucks start to stop driving as many routes. You immediately saw companies start to wonder, should they conduct that logistical resupply now or wait? I thought that's what we were going to see in the Sea of Azov. I was mistaken. Military informant, Russian mill blogger, thought the same. He said, quote, "I wonder if anyone will realize on the 4th day that keeping tankers in groups without any cover is not a very good idea." Spoiler alert, they didn't think about that. They continued to send out tankers, and on the 9th of July, the 4th day in a row of these strikes, Ukraine hit 12. So 2, 8, 9, 12. They say additionally, they hit a cargo ship and a tugboat, adding that in total over the past 96 hours, units of the unmanned systems forces struck 35 different enemy vessels. And looking at the footage, again, an absolute massacre of these fuel containers. Now, we don't have all of the details on if these were all destroyed, at least a couple. We saw smoke plumes rising in the distance, at the very least damaged. Also, again, adding the concern, the back of mind thought for the people moving these tankers across the Sea of Azov, that is not a safe passage. They're at the very least going to have to reconsider when and how they carry out those refueling operations. I don't think it is safe to say at this point that 35 ships were sunk. In fact, I've not seen evidence at this point that any of them were actually sunk, just significantly damaged. Now, the Russians, as you can expect, pretty fired up about this. They are complaining that the Black Sea Fleet is proving itself worthless, and they're saying that the Sea of Azov is starting to look like Ukraine's Strait of Hormuz, as in an area that Ukraine is fully able to control with their drones. But first, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Upside. Hey, isn't it super cool how everything seems to get more expensive at the same time? Like, across the board, things are more expensive than they were a month, a year, certainly 2 or 3 years ago, except TVs. Isn't that the thing? TVs keep getting cheaper for some reason. Anyways, it's exhausting. Like, you would think that we could have a little breathing room somewhere, someplace. Nope, not going to happen. Okay. So that's why I partnered with today's sponsor, Upside, a free app that actually gives you cash back on gas, groceries, and dining. You open the app, claim an offer near you, pay with your card like normal, and get real cash back. Not points, not expiring credits, money that you can transfer directly into your bank account. And something that's cool here is you can layer it on top of other programs. So you don't have to choose Upside instead of your, gas station rewards or current credit card rewards. This is in addition to. And once you start checking the app before going to the gas station or the grocery store or the restaurant, it just becomes a habit. It's really quick and easy. And there's already over 100,000 participating locations, which means that wherever you are going or whatever you are doing, there's probably an offer nearby. Now, Upside has already given back $1 billion to its users. So to find out how much you could earn, download the free Upside app and use promo code Preston to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Did you hear that? That's like a significant discount. An extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas using promo code Preston. Link in the description below. And thank you so much to Upside for sponsoring today's video. Now, looking at the Russian responses, it's kind of as expected. Pretty fired up across the board. Two majors, a Russian military blogger or war correspondent said, quote, "The enemy has created even more serious problems with the energy supply to Crimea. In the face of the enemy's information warfare operation, it is now critically important to keep a cool head despite the difficult situation." And this is an interesting dynamic of how Russia is approaching this. By and large, there's kind of three ways that they are looking at this situation, the energy issues playing out across Russia. One, they're calling it a Ukrainian information operation. Nothing is as bad as Ukraine is making it out to be. I would say that that's a bit naive. It's kind of putting the head in the sand and hoping things turn out for the better. There was a report that came out this morning showing that in Crimea, I think it was a garbage truck company, was paying the equivalent of $15 per gallon. That is critical. Like, can you imagine what that would look like if gas here in the United States went to $15 per gallon? So yeah, the situation is a problem. The Crimean governor in recent days has said there are going to, for the foreseeable future, be plenty of days where there's not going to be any fuel available at all. It's clearly a problem, and they're just trying to ignore it. The other approach is arguing, why does Ukraine still have gas stations at all? Why do they still have port facilities that work at all? And then the third one, eventually they get there, they say, we got to start protecting these ships. Rybar, Russian media as well, said, for the fourth day in a row, Ukrainian formations are literally shelling tankers and cargo ships in the Sea of Azov with drones. Today, a new attack occurred. This was on the 9th. And the total number of vessels struck has already reached 35 units. So he said, again, some can cry out, where is the Black Sea Fleet? But he says the answer, many will not like. Two majors went a step further, saying if the Black Sea Fleet was trying to escort these tankers, they would just get sunk. Like, it doesn't do any good to put military ships out there because they're not able to protect themselves in the high seas, evidenced by the fact that the majority of the Black Sea Fleet for a long time now has barricaded themselves in port, protecting themselves from Ukrainian mostly unmanned surface vessels, but also now aerial drones. So the Russian answer, two majors saying, you put them out there, we're just going to lose more military vessels in addition to these commercial tankers. Rybar continued by saying, without radical reforms and changes, hoping for the Black Sea Fleet is pointless. And it's good that only in the 5th year did they start installing machine guns, electronic warfare systems, and other countermeasures on ships and boats. He says it was precisely the unwillingness to accept the new reality that led to these problems, where supplying Crimea depends on sea deliveries. And the tankers and cargo ships are not only unprotected by even rifle teams on board, but also sail in a friendly column, making the work even easier for Ukraine. Again, it was pretty wild seeing this footage, just ship after ship after ship lined up in the open sea with no clear protection. I mean, you have to assume that some of these drones were shot down at some point and that there was not a 100% success rate, but where? Like, doesn't look like there's any defensive fire coming from those ships. Doesn't look like. And there's some of these videos taken from a pretty significant distance off. It's not just the last final moments before impact. Doesn't look to be any escort. So if these things weren't shot down over land, which is a significant distance for what it's worth that it's flying over land and not being intercepted, by the time it hits the open water, it is just a free-for-all, and those ships were completely defenseless. Now, Russian mill blogger Military Informant talked about how this is effectively turning the Sea of Azov into the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, "If everything continues like this, then we will get our own little Strait of Hormuz, where Ukraine will play the role of Iran and we the role of the United States. Ships simply will not be able to reach Crimea and return without being hit by drones." So it's worth talking about what this means. I mean, the footage here is crazy, seeing that strike after strike after strike against really unprotected assets, which is, again, crazy that Crimea is facing a fuel shortage, major fuel shortage right now, and one of the few ways they have to get fuel there across the open Sea of Azov is going unprotected. So stepping back, that's kind of the number one thing, is what happens if this fuel shortage continues. And big picture, this type of shortage can lead to a country's collapse. Now, I'm not going to say that that's on the verge of happening or anything, but as this continues to get worse, $15 a gallon, how long would we put up with that here in the United States, or the equivalent anywhere around the world? When you look at that in comparison to the annual or average Russian monthly salary, they can't do that. They can't function. So even after waiting in line for hours on end to get up there and spend an entire week or 2 weeks' paycheck to fill up their gas tank once, get out of here. Like, at what point do they revolt, to be blunt? Or the government just loses control? Now, we haven't seen that yet. There's been an incredible amount of economic pressure on Russia and staggering casualties from the start of the war, both things that personally and I think a lot of Western analysts thought would have brought out more anger from the Russian people, and they didn't. They're just dealing with it. So maybe we'll see the same thing here, but this is getting really bad for Russia really quickly. Maxim Kalishnikov, a Russian mill blogger, said, quote, "A fuel tsunami is currently unfolding in the country. The Ukrainian forces are taking out not just refineries and depots, they've also begun striking the pumping stations of gas and oil pipelines and tankers in the Sea of Azov, cutting off Crimea's fuel supply." He says it won't be long before even the clumsy mobilization of reservists becomes impossible, as does the forced conversion of bank deposits into government bonds. For a fuel supply crisis paralyzes everything. He says, add to this the clear threat of ballistic missile strikes on electrical substations and power plants themselves. So again, when fuel starts to run out, this is the impact the people of Russia will feel that may actually bring about change in the country. I understand that that might seem like a bit of a stretch, but it's the first time in this war we have seen this. The first time in this war that we have really seen the Russian people all across the country, not just in the areas bordering Ukraine or the Russians now living in the occupied territories, are feeling the direct impact of the war in an unsustainable way. There was Tatargami, an analyst, Ukrainian analyst on X, shared some posts on Russian Telegram channels, the comments of Russian citizens complaining to the regional governor saying, we haven't had electricity for days on end. There's been hours-long blackouts. The water isn't moving, like the pumping stations aren't working. There's no gas at the stations. Like, it is becoming unlivable in Crimea. And we're starting to see across the occupied territories a situation where gas is unavailable, food is harder to come by, right? They're not starving, not by a long shot. But these fuel shortages and the resulting kind of secondary and tertiary effects, we're starting to see across areas deeper and deeper inside of Russia. This isn't exactly tied to today's video, but I couldn't pass this up. Maxim Kalishnikov in that same frustrating post said, quote, Ukraine, which in April 2014 could barely scrape together 17,000 troops and struggled to cope with Igor Girkin's detachment, is now dismantling our energy sector. What is this, if not a resounding and humiliating failure? Again, not like directly tied to the course of today's video, but you can see how frustrated so many inside of Russia are getting. The Crimean governor, as mentioned a few minutes ago, said, quote, the fuel supply situation remains tense and will continue for some time. On certain days, there will be no fuel available to be freely sold, as the priorities continue to be government services, military, emergency services. And that's in the short term where we're going to see this hit. And we are likely already starting to see this impact across the occupied territories. Putin and the Russian government is going to have to prioritize who gets fuel. That is never a good situation in war. When anything, whether it's food, fuel, medical supplies, electricity, anything, when you have to decide in a time of war, does it go to the military or the civilians? There is no right answer. There is no good answer. It is a major problem when a government has to make that decision. That is the situation that Russia is finding themselves in right now, and it likely is already starting to impact military logistics at the front, especially areas like Crimea, of course, but also when you get west, kind of southwest in the occupied territories, Zaporizhia to a degree. You know, you look up at Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Donetsk, technically pretty short route to get into Russia proper. But the further you move west, the more these Russian logistics are traveling more and more exclusively by road with less fuel in range of Ukrainian drones. So it is harder to get supplies further west under increased threat. We should start to see a pretty significant impact start to build in some of the southern occupied territories, especially Kherson, especially right across the river from Ukrainian forces on the right bank. Now, quick fundraiser update here. In just the last couple of days, last week, I think it is, we've been able to deliver the 17th, 18th, and 19th vehicles under this year-long campaign we're running with Car for Ukraine to a couple different units at the front line. In fact, we just got a great video from the 225th Assault Regiment that we're working with right now to support with a new vehicle, and they are currently fighting in one of the hottest sectors at the front. We'll play that video here for those interested in learning more or even contributing to this campaign. That link will be in the description below. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.
We are the 1st Battalion, 225th Separate Assault Regiment, currently deployed on the Gulay-Pole direction, defending our country against the Russian invaders. At the moment, we urgently need a pickup truck to carry out combat missions. We are reaching out to the teams at Car for Ukraine and Bandera Mobil with a request to help us to purchase, prepare, and deliver the vehicle. We also ask Preston and his community to support this fundraiser. Glory to Ukraine!